morning. As always, I'm Lauren Cook, your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising. So excited that folks are joining us for our last coffee of the year. As always, I've already had my coffee and I'm on to water, but I hope you have a beverage, settling in for good conversation. This is busy time of year for college advising, certainly for the seniors that finally all sort of pulled the trigger on a decision by Sunday. And some folks waited until Sunday, which is not something I recommend, but all of the seniors have a plan now. So I'm fully on to you all with total concentration. But I've been working with your kids for a couple of weeks since we've been back. So I'm just going to do, as always, a couple of reminders just about what's happening right now at school. So you have a sense of the kind of checklist that they're working through. And then I am so delighted that we have a couple of senior parents with us here that are going to offer you some of their wisdom from what just happened. As always, we'll leave some time for questions. So super quickly, I am meeting with all of the juniors right now, again, one by one, just kind of working through the class. I think I'm almost halfway through. So if I have not met with your child yet, it's coming. Everybody's scheduled. So everybody has an appointment. It's happening. And we're doing a couple of things during that. Some of it's just a general check-in, but we're also specifically talking about teacher recommendations and really trying to narrow in on who's the right folks to ask at JCHS. And then they need to make those requests by the end of the school year so that faculty kind of know what their workload is going into the summer. So if I haven't met with your child yet, they have not, made final decisions probably, so that's okay. But know that that's something that's on their to-do list. And then I've also been in junior English classes, did both of Miss Cornelius's classes on Wednesday, and I'll be in Miss Faux's classes next week to start launching the college essay unit. And so your children will be brainstorming these topics. I've told them I'm totally available to help them. Obviously, their teacher is as well if they're not quite sure how to get started on this. And it will be turned into me and to the teacher so that we both can give some feedback on that. So if there are questions around that, let me know. Also know that your child may not be 100% willing to share it with you. Many are, but some are like, I'm not prepared for this yet. And that's okay. You can always shoot me an email if you're like, are they doing okay? What's it about? We can always have some back channel conversations. And then they have one more questionnaire to do for me, giving some updates about what's happening this summer, hopefully reporting on what teachers they're going to ask for their letters, and a couple of other just wrap up things as we finish up the school year. And next Friday, we'll have a class meeting during advising time for all of the juniors. And we will have a couple of seniors in that meeting as well, like I'm doing with you all today, to also talk a little bit about the process. And I find that hearing from their peers about how they navigated some of this, built lists, made decisions, can also be really impactful. So I'm going to pause there with my stuff and introduce, some of you may know folks in the room, many of you may not, because we haven't been able to have much in the way of parent gatherings at school. But I'm really thrilled that these three got up early and agreed to join us today. So Lissa Bernstein Lawler is the parent of Kai. She's helpfully put that in her in her name. Thank you so much, Lissa. Beth Yeager-Skagen is the parent of twins. So she had two folks going through this at the same time, and Zoe. She's got double the knowledge on this. And Carolyn Milestic is a parent of Gilad Pifko, who's the second child in the Pifko family that I've worked with, which is delightful. So I've got just a couple of questions for them to each ruminate on, and then we'll just open it up to all of you for either questions for me or for them about reflections on doing all this. So one question that's been coming up a lot in the last few weeks with junior parents is like, how do I get my child to lock into this process and get excited about it? So my first question to all of you is like, how or when did each of your students really kind of, take this on as their own project or find some real interest in it? So whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
I can start. So Kai is sort of a, dragging his heels kind of guy, and it was very typical with the process. When I really saw him engage and just connect, was when we did some college tours. So we went at the end of September, I think is when we finally did it. COVID, everything kind of delayed that. But I think actually it was really great because at least students were on campus. And that's when it became something interesting and exciting to him. And I think all the prep with Miss Cook and sort of thinking about it a little bit and working on some things over the summer sort of helped. But that was like, boom, this is really what I want to do with the next stage of my life.
I would agree. I would agree that we did over the summer. We visited schools when school wasn't in session, but even that alone kind of made it real.
And I'll echo both of those sentiments. I mean, COVID had really upended our plans, and there were a lot of vacation cancellations. Gilad had a lot of his trips canceled. And so for us, we took advantage of the opportunity in the summertime to go visit schools, just because it kind of turned into a quasi vacation. It helped a lot that we have family in a lot of the cities that we were visiting. But it was around the summertime before his junior year, and it helps them really get a sense of place and just start figuring out what kind of size am I looking for. You don't even have to like leave the state if you just started going through that process of, do you want to be on a large campus? Do you want to be in a small liberal arts college? And just kind of like feel your way and what feels right was definitely helpful. And he started getting pretty excited about that.
For anyone who did visits during the summer, can you just speak to if you felt like that was still helpful as opposed to during the school year?
100% helpful, I
Yeah.
thought. A lot of people said it's not helpful. It's probably not as helpful, but actually, yeah, Hannah made a decision based on us visiting in a summer without people in session. You see, you still have the students, you have the tour guides, you still get the spiel, and then they have a lot of the kids, they're like online, they're reading the Reddit about the schools, and they're following the schools pages after that, so they get a sense of the culture once they visited.
I 100% agree with that. And it became kind of a running joke that when we were on college campuses, I kept annoying my son by saying things like, can you see yourself here? And he really did not appreciate that. And so I had to find another way to say that. And I knew that there was one college in one university in particular. It's the one that he ultimately accepted. And the most that I got out of him was, he said, I'm really vibing with this place. And then I knew that that was definitely on his radar.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I'm sure there are lots of challenging parts of this process, but was there anything you found particularly challenging, or anything that's still sort of burned into your brain at this moment as we're coming to the end of it, that you would give a heads up about to other parents?
Which part? I don't want
to. Whatever comes to mind.
What comes to mind?
Well, there were a lot of challenges. There were challenges along the way. But first of all, let me just preface all of this by saying to all of the parents here that I'm so excited for you. This is really, it can be very challenging, but it's also so gratifying and rewarding, to go through this. And it's a journey. And, just remember to breathe and, not to take personally some of the body blows when you're going 15 rounds over things like essays and editing essays. Big challenge for us was particularly that, where there was they were going through the prompts, and Gilad would be writing his thing. And so he would ask me to read whatever it was that he wrote. And I was really clear about I am not writing anything for you. But then he would write something and I would definitely have comments about it. And sometimes it was really challenging to get through those, difficult conversations, until I would finally say, look, I've been to university, you haven't, this is your experience. If you feel good about this, then keep it. And then ultimately he would be ruminating it, and he might make changes or not.
I know that I'm also there as a backup. I have a moment with Gilad in my head from the beginning of the year where he emailed me and said, it was like September 5th. And he said, this is my final draft of my essay. Here it is. And I think I put 42 comments on it. And he came in my office and just let out a torrent of curse words, which is fine. I feel like I should have a sign in my office that says you can curse here. And he's like, but you were right. So know that there's a second layer beyond all of you as well.
That was always helpful when I was like, they were like, no. I'd be like, well, why don't you just ask Miss Cook?
Yes.
And then, sometimes they come back and they say, Miss Cook said it was fine. I was like, great. That's,
And I think they would be more deferential toward you. At least that was my experience.
Right.
I'm happy to absorb that so you don't have to have the body blow.
I would echo all of that.
Yeah. And the one challenge that I had, and I don't know if Miss Cook ever saw it in the end because that wasn't, but I had a lot of, I don't know if it's generational, I don't know what it is, but there was a lot of things that I knew that Hannah and Zoe had done, awards they had won, and I'd say, like an example was like, oh, you published this when you did a summer program at Barnard in the Columbia Library. Both of them were like, I'm not putting that in there. Every kid got to publish something. And I would fight with them, the humility. They didn't want to say, well, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal. That was easy. And that was really hard to be like, this is a time for you to step up. They didn't want to be braggy. And I had to push them to literally be like, it's real. And then they'd always come back and say, oh yeah, I guess that is real. Just because it was easy doesn't mean, or just because a lot of kids got it, or just because you didn't feel. So I felt like there's a lot more things, I think a lot more successes we found through the process. And so really sit with them and them having to them step into themselves. That was hard.
Excellent point.
Yeah.
I'll just mention, and you probably did it, I'm not sure, but there was a faux admissions workshop that we all did. And Kai's not a guy who's done a lot of extracurriculars. And I didn't feel like he had sort of that story that, in that workshop, or a lot of kids seem to have in terms of their essay and their extracurriculars and those sorts of activities. And I definitely was really worried about him not having that theme of his life. I tried to keep that to myself. He didn't need to know that I had those concerns. Miss Cook did an amazing job of helping to guide him. And he really wound up in his essay and different interests that I didn't really give much credit to, because they weren't typical formed extracurricular activities or scheduled activities. He really had that theme and that story. And that's really what he was looking for also in a college. But I will say that just having those moments of oh my gosh, my child doesn't have all those different external trappings that he's supposed to have to apply for college, was, definitely a moment of pause.
Right.
Sure. And know that I will help drag in some cases some of these things out of your children if I feel like they are not leading with all of their strengths. And also, to be fair, I mean, they exist in their own world and don't necessarily understand the bigger picture of, lots of things about them may be really unique outside of their own little viewpoint of themselves. So that's where I'm going to try and push them to highlight that stuff.
And the other thing I just want to add is, I'm not a night person, and for whatever reason, I'd be at the end of the day and it would be 11 o'clock at night and they'd be like, could you look at this for me right now? And I actually towards the end had to be like, and I have two. So I was like, here are my time slots that I'm available. You have to sign up for them and you get to meet with me on my time, not on your time. And they were like, how is that fair? I was like, that's it. I'm not doing it. So I stopped doing it on their time frame.
Amazing. Boundaries are so important, and know that I'm going to put boundaries on them too. I'm not responding to them after 8 p.m. because my phone goes in airplane mode. I don't respond to my friends and family. So, so yeah, these are important things, and it will help teach them some deadlines and advanced preparation and all the rest.
And I don't know if anyone has older students who have been through this process, maybe not because you're attending this call, but I will say that another challenge for me personally was that having an older daughter and having gone through this process with Ms. Cook, she was a very she's a different person, and her style and her approach is very different. And I very quickly had to modify the way that I was working with my son, because I realized that what worked with my daughter would not work with him. So that was a personal challenge for me.
Same with twins as well.
Right.
at the same time was very
Yeah.
different, actually.
What was the most rewarding part of this process? Highlights.
There's so many. So
There
there really are. I mean, just
made me cry, actually. Like, it's so, yeah.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was a couple of things. So, first of all, getting the letter, like getting the acceptance. He opened up his phone, and there it was, the school that he really, really wanted. We were hoping that this was the school where he would be accepted, because we just knew it would be a good fit. So that was obviously one, but also just uh, a lot of the schools are test optional, test blind, but when he would get an SAT score back where he did well, and we would say to him, okay, you're within striking distance now. And you could see, like, just the confidence over time, like writing a good essay when he felt really good about the Common App essay. There was a sense of just being proud of it, and seeing that come together. All of those were just such rewarding moments.
For me, it was just, it's what's most rewarding is just Kai's growth throughout the whole process. I wasn't sure if he had it in him. I wasn't sure. I knew he had it in him. I wasn't sure he would be able to tap into it and really see it and accept it in himself. And watching his confidence and sense of self grow has been absolutely amazing. And I also think that for him, I think interviewing is one of his strong skills. And he's somebody who's sort of always kind of, I think, related a little bit more successfully with adults than peers. But, of course he was nervous, but I think that it helped him actually his senior year to open up to his peers a lot more. And that's been a really beautiful thing.
For, spoiler alert, Hannah and Zoe applied both early to their first choice schools. Hannah got in, Zoe was deferred. Zoe did get in event to their first choice school after being deferred. But I can tell you the process with Zoe going from the perseverance, and I'm not sure I recommend the getting deferred process, but the growth, like if you had a choice, it's not ideal. But the growth of perseverance and determination that Zoe put in with, I want this, like that was, and the continued essays and the continued showing of leaning into who I am with such clarity was really powerful. It was a lot more work than it was for my daughter who got in early, and I think even more work for other kids that didn't get deferred and hit hard in that way. But I noticed the difference between essays from October, November, then January letters of continued interest. It was the growth was extraordinary, which was really exciting. And it was fun to see in the end, like, have Zoe, who had lots of choices, really decide who are they as a person, like, who am I, know myself. And so with having so many having options, it became such a soul searching experience about really who am I in the world, where am I going to succeed, where are my people. And it was pretty powerful and big, and ultimately kind of funny that there was an early decision and then it became down to the wire at the end. But both of my kids did land at their first choice schools, which is exciting. Having them, but their second or their third, all of that would have been okay too. Because the other thing that's also, it was really exciting getting those acceptance, those videos. I mean, I have to tell you, I have Zoe's video, after like literally many from the deferment to the blah to the, that I watched that video when I need a dopamine hit, like as a, like, what, it just to see the joy and the pride and the excitement. And then the rewarding part, the biggest rewarding part for me was when I knew it was like the night that Zoe got accepted. Zoe sat and read every single course description in the manual and was like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take, and then like next day setting, like, oh my goodness, it's not just about the process, it's where they're going. So watching the growth. And these essays, man, if I ever feel crappy about my kid not doing dishes or something, I go back and I read the essays because it's, I mean, Miss Cook really pulls it out. Who are they? And if you get to do it through writing, it's not, even if they end up not going to college, the process itself is so powerful as a developmental piece. So yes, it's can be torturous at times, but I think well worth it. You know.
May I say just one thing, because you touched up on it, Beth, about failing, about taking a hit early on in the process. My son applied to a school, early decision, it was a stretch, and it was a big stretch. And when he said he wanted to go, I thought, really? Okay, if you want to try that, go for it. And Ms. Cook is really good about just kind of tempering, finding that right balance of, don't want to dash your hopes, but let's be realistic here. And so he applied for it, early decision. He did not get in. And it was the first letter, and it was really disappointing for him. It hurts as a parent, but he got over it, very quickly, and just realized, okay, I tried, I gave it my best shot. There is the other school that he ultimately got into, which he felt like was a much better fit for him. I think he himself knew that he was really stretching himself, and in all likelihood, he probably would not get into the school. And we say to him, like, there's always law school, there's grad school. I mean, if you think that you really want to go there, maybe try again, but it wasn't meant to be, and that's okay. So watching him deal with rejection was also a very good learning lesson, especially at this age.
Totally. Powerful.
So one last question for all of you, and I've wanted to keep this a little neutral in terms of where the kids are going, but after we do this last question, you could perhaps tell us where they've landed. But do you have a piece of advice that you would offer now that I know we don't have a lot of time to reflect back on because it all just happened, but yeah, Alyssa.
Well, Kai said it best. He said, Miss Cook knows what she's doing. Use Miss Cook.
That's what my kid said. Yeah.
I will say I'm always sort of hesitant to be a bother or be a pest or ask questions, or maybe it's a stupid question. And, but Miss Cook, first off, is like the loveliest, kindest, most thoughtful person, and so supportive. And I would say, do not hesitate to reach out to her. Do not hesitate to encourage your children. She really, there is no stupid question. There is no stupid, like, how do I word this? That's one of the things I had to deal with a lot was, how do I reach out to the school and ask this question? And I kind of connected with this person more than the actual regional rep, or Kai did, or, whatever. Miss Cook is really, truly the best resource, and she really guides the kids through the process in a amazing, thoughtful, supportive, kind, provoking, challenging way. And I just keep shifting them back to her. And the other thing I would say is, and Carolyn mentioned this is the child's process, not ours. So step back.
I would say,
thank you. That's lovely.
The Miss Cook
things other than me, but yes.
No, but it's not just that. No, there's an extra Miss Cook piece, that there's going to be internet advice that's different, or parents that see other college counselors, and trust her. Believe Miss Cook. Like, don't get sucked into alternate advices. She really knows what she's doing, and so surrender to believing what she's saying. So that's what I feel like.
Surrender to me. I love it.
It's true. It's just sort of like, there's
How
like
often do you
all
hear
sorts
that?
of like, and so it's really important to just because you also, it's not just that the colleges based on JCHS and the type of students that are applying, that it's very specialized, that the internet or even other college counselors I don't think could quite get in the same way that you do. I think that's true.
Well, I'm going to make Miss Cook blush even more, because that was my 100% first bit of advice. And the validating point too is not only just the fact that you've done an amazing job with the students, but my students were at another school, and I'm watching Gilad's friends who are still at this school go through the same process with their college counselor. Their college counselor at that school knows of Miss Cook and said, "You guys are really lucky to have her. She knows what she's doing."
Yes.
So definitely, you're also quite good at, for students who might have issues with time management, keeping things going. I mean, there are time sensitive things, and just making sure that you have the gentle reminders. And I don't know with all the sausage making that was going on in the background, but you did a really great job at just making sure that, they stayed on course. And then one other thing I would say, sorry, Lissa, is just my mantra to both of my children was, there is a school out there for you. There are lots of schools, lots of universities. You will find the right place. You will find your peeps. You'll find a place where you'll get a good education, and you'll be happy.
That's what I was going to mention. In addition, that the approach we took was really about finding the best matches for Kai, and really there were more than one for sure. And it was not at all about the prestigious places or the big names or any of those things. Sort of lucky because he's always kind of been a square peg, so that's how we've moved through life. But just getting rid of all of that noise really helped. The book, The Colleges That Changed Lives, and the website was also really was helpful as well. But I very much, keep your feet on the ground, and remember, it's really about finding the places where your child is going to thrive, and not about the big names.
Thank you all for that. And your children are delightful, and it's been delightful to work with them. Can we go down the list and just say where they have landed? So Lissa, do you want to start?
Sure. Kai is going to go to Willamette next year.
To where?
Willamette.
Nice.
It is outside Portland, Oregon. Great little
Congrats.
liberal arts college. So, and do you remember he's very interested in politics, history, government, and the state capitol is some certain number of feet.
76 feet across the street.
Okay, so the number of times I heard it's 76 feet away. It's like a mantra throughout the year.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beth, do you want to? Yeah.
So yes, both Hannah and Zoe, my twins, are going to one of the Claremont colleges. Zoe is going to Pomona, and Hannah is going to Scripps.
Nice.
Yep. And Scripps is a
Congrats.
women's college. We love a women's college.
Scripps is a women's college, and it really came down to Hannah really wanted to go to a women's college, period, wanted to be on the West Coast. That was it. So, Zoe was a little more complicated, but yes, that's where we landed.
Excellent.
We're thrilled.
And Gilad will be starting in the fall at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He doesn't know really what he wants to study. And so he said, why not study something that I like and I'm interested in? And so he will be in the astrophysics program, at least initially, because we fully suspect that he's going to change that major. But that's okay. He's going blue.
And I literally just said to him, I talked about one of his pieces of writing in the junior English classes, because it was the most unusual thing I read this year, but another school had a question about if there's a course catalog typo, what is your chosen major and why? And so he wrote about astrophysics, the study of baking in space, and then wrote an entire 600-word thing on yeast rising when there's no gravity and all that. It was
cool.
Funny and also very scientifically grounded. So
it was fun, and I don't think he'd mind me telling you that was for the University of Chicago. He did not get into University of Chicago, but that was one hell of an essay, and he should be proud of it.
Yep. Excellent. So I'm going to just address the question in the chat and then open the floor up for other questions. So basically, we've got a question about, some students at other schools that have not had as much college advising, and some questions around, there doesn't seem to be an obvious pattern about who's getting in, who's being waitlisted. Students are not necessarily getting into the places that they want to go. How can we avoid that with the junior class? And so I'm going to start with the hard truth of like, we can't avoid it. Like there are not going to be any guarantees that everybody's going to get into where they want to get in or not be waitlisted from a place where they'd really like to go. But there are a lot of mitigating things that we can do. One is obviously having an appropriate list. And by that, I mean, we want these reachy places. I wanted Gilad to take the moonshot and try her University of Chicago. And then I also, I'm going to insist that there are some likely schools on the list where we know they want him. And I regularly fight with both students and parents about this human psychology of, well, I don't want to go any place that would want me. And so I'm going to want all of you to just sort of process that and sit with that and think about what that means, because the vast majority of the schools in this country take the vast majority of the applicants. I think the average admit rate across the US is 68%. So there are lots of schools out there for your child. What we're going to have to do is find likelies that they can get excited about. And that's one way that we can make sure they've got options and we see what happens. But I will say there is, a little bit of a chaotic element to things this year. And I think we're continuing to come out of, knock on all the things, this pandemic, where behavior has been really unpredictable and erratic, both by schools and by kids, not knowing whether folks want to go far from home. Are they making decisions based on, state approaches to masking and vaccines and all the rest? So whereas most schools use this econometric modeling decision-making process, and they look at how classes from the last 3 years, 4 years have behaved to predict, who they want to admit, how many should be on the wait list, et cetera. Those models are really wild right now. And I'm hearing about a number of schools that are over-enrolled, some like really over-enrolled. And then there has been, a fair amount of waitlist activities from other schools already. I'm on listservs with other Bay Area college counselors to hear what's happening. And we had a student come off the waitlist yesterday to his top choice, which was really exciting. So you do have to buckle in. This is a roller coaster and we can't predict every step of the way. But I will just echo the please listen to me that everyone just said in terms of trying to shape that list so that we're, giving a cushion, if nothing else than the egos of this all, because nothing's worse than having a student that doesn't get in anywhere, because usually some piece of it is that they didn't take that advice about really being open to likely schools. So I will pause on that there and say, doing any gap years? Yeah, we have 9 students doing gap years this year, but I don't think anyone in the room is. Yeah, so we have 9 gap years and 1 student enlisting in the IDF. So it's a pretty healthy group of folks that are going to take a pause before college. And yeah, so that's exciting. And I actually think Miss Hunt took a photo yesterday of the bulletin board I have outside my office that has all the little college flags on it and an Israel map with some different, all the kids are going to Israel, by the way, this year. There's another country in the mix, but I think that picture will be in the week ahead later today. So you can kind of see the spread of things. We have a question in the chat about how important what they want to, how important is it what they want to major in colleges? Do any colleges choose based on that? Major can play a role for sure. And that's a conversation we'll start to have as we get closer to the fall. And we're looking at what are the schools on your students list. But with the UCs, with state schools in particular, that can play a role. And it's really more about engineering and computer science. Those are extremely competitive across campuses, really across the country. Doesn't mean your students shouldn't check that box if that's what they are most authentically interested in, but that's again where we're going to have to think about. So where are the places where it's extremely competitive and what your profile looks like in comparison with that versus what are some other broad access options for you. But for a lot of places, whether you're looking at psychology or art history or, whatnot, even physics, it's not a big difference based on that.
But I will tell you, for one of my children who was undecided, having a school where they really didn't want you to be decided and said that they really want children to, at Pomona, they really won't let you even declare until the end of your sophomore year. That was actually a factor in our decision making, picking a school where we didn't actually have to decide. So
excellent point. And I will say the CSUs, like a Cal Poly, a San Francisco State, a Sonoma, you really do need to, you get kind of funneled into that, whatever you've checked off on the application. And it's not impossible to change your mind, but it's definitely not easy, and it's not always encouraged. And that's kind of the difference between, say, a liberal arts college, where you are, the whole goal is for you to get a breadth of study and then decide later on what you want to go in depth with your major. What else? What other? Oh, gap years. Yes. So just about everyone who's doing a gap year has chosen a school and deferred their enrollment. And it's a mix of private schools, and there's one UC in the mix and whatnot. So yes, there is one student who has decided she didn't love her options the first time around. And so we're going to do it again while she's on her gap year. And I'm available to help with that. So
may I say something about that too? Because my daughter, who is 3 years older, did a gap year. And she had deferred from her university. She went to Israel and joined what's called a mechina, which is sort of a pre-military academy before going into the IDF, because she was trying to decide if she wanted to go into the IDF and do her military service. She's very drawn to Israel. She ultimately decided that she did not want to do her military service, but she stayed in Israel for the year and then went back. But she had deferred to her school in DC, and it worked out great.
Can I ask a question about gap years? Is there a panel of current students and maybe prior students that could be put on to say, this is why I chose to do a gap year? I have a son that's young and I like the idea, but he's just so ready now that we've started doing college visits. He's like, I'm out. I want that. And so it's hard to, draw that back and say, okay, there's also this year of this amazing things you could do, go to Israel and get an internship. So
yeah, I've absolutely done that.
We can do still.
Yeah, I've done that in the past. We had a pretty robust one actually during COVID. I tried to pull one together this past year, but early in the fall, I could not get the seniors to think about getting back on Zoom. If they didn't have to, which is really the thing. If people are on gap years or off at their college now after they've completed their gap year. But now that we've got a little breathing room from Zoom life, I will try again for this coming fall so that folks can, because I'm a big fan of it. And I think being able to take a breath and the maturity that you gain and the independence and the clarity that you might have once you arrive on a college campus and better take advantage of what's available to you there rather than just fresh off the JCHS train. So yes, thank you I'll make a note about that. I do also want to name a question in the chat about the UCs. Can we briefly talk about the present situation, differences, similarities for JCHS students, the general landscape? Yeah, I mean, the UC situation is not getting less competitive as they've become test blind. And I think generally folks are thrilled. I'm thrilled that they're test blind, and it is bringing greater diversity and nuance to their selection process. But the inflation of the pools with their application numbers is really extraordinary. I'm friends with the dean at UCLA, and he just, I saw him at the conference I was at a few weeks ago when I missed everyone coming back from Israel. And, his brain is melting over 150,000 applications. Like, how do you even put eyes on all of those? But I will say, despite that, we had 2 students get in, which, makes the numbers. I don't know what the admit rate, I haven't done all the numbers yet, but I think it actually makes our admit rate pretty consistent with past years, given, what the competition looks like. And we have students going to almost all of the UC campuses. I don't think we have anyone enrolling at Merced or Riverside. And maybe Santa Barbara, but we did have, successes. We will always have more success, and we have a lot of students happily on these campuses at UC Santa Cruz and UC Davis. We now have probably a small softball team at UCLA, but I don't anticipate that we will continue to have those numbers if their, their pool stays where it's at. We actually have 2 kids going to Berkeley this year, which is, not something that's happened in my 6 years at the school. So, but, there's a lot about the UC application that I'm going to want to work out and process with your kids, because the big thing to keep in mind is that they are, for lack of sort of a better term, representing themselves in court, right? Like it's all them. There are no recommendations. I can't say anything about and give context about them. Everything that they submit to the UCs comes from them. It's a totally student-driven application. And they could, in theory, go off and do that all by themselves, never show me anything, and then we'll see what happens. I would not recommend that, both in terms of how they're filling out basic data, because there are certain things the UC GPA is only from sophomore and junior year. And so let's say that they take a college class this summer at City College or, Skyline or something. And then when they're entering the application, they put it as it's a senior year class. They've just lost an opportunity to factor that into their sophomore and junior year GPA. There's just little detailed things like this that I am scanning for. And so it's really important that they are in the process with me with that. And I make videos for them and go through the application, talk about all this stuff. And I will push those out in August, and there's workshops at school. And there was actually a time, Beth, where I was holding a application workshop after school, and Zoe was the only one who showed up. And they were like, how am I the only, wait, I get Miss Cook for 90 minutes straight?
I remember that. That was
let's knock out all your applications right now. So it was great to do that with Zoe, but I would love for more students to take advantage of these things when they can. So the little things that we can do can, help them in this very competitive landscape. But I will say, I will get realistic with them. Next month in particular, once their final grades come out for the year, I'm going to go into SCORE and start ranking their lists as naming if something feels like a reach, a possible, or a likely. And that's a hard moment. And I'll send an email in advance to everyone saying this is coming, and know that this can feel like, sort of a, I don't want to use the term body blow, Carolyn said earlier, but, sometimes they don't want to see, that the 8 schools they have on their list are all reaches. But this is a moment where we have to get clear-eyed, right? And think about the odds are not ever in your favor with some places. And it doesn't mean you can't apply, but we need to then backfill the list with lots of other things. Okay, enough about the competitive nature of the UCs. What else we got?
Did you find, was it random? I mean, I found Zoe got into better UCs and waitlisted at less competitive. It felt a little bizarre.
I will say yes, and I'm going to just pause on the word better. So, and just say maybe.
I meant more harder to get into historically.
Sure.
I'm sorry about that.
It's fine. And I think that's, so it's a reminder that all the UCs are not the same. It's the same system, but there's different communities, different campuses, different things that they are looking for. And I think major selection sometimes this is where it can be make or break when you're also dealing with an incredibly competitive campus. I've been most confused by Irvine over the past few years, because they do seem to kind of pluck one student that might not necessarily have the top GPA or whatnot in that pool, and that one student gets admitted. And I'm like, I don't understand. And then at my conference, I ran into someone from Irvine, and I was like, I know you can't, and it's huge and all the rest, but I'm weirded out by some of your decisions, and I'm having a hard time being able to predict things. And they said, we have 80 majors on our campus, and 86% of kids that apply have designated 15 of them that they're interested in. So if you are in one of those other 65 majors that you've said you've expressed an interest in, you automatically, and so there are some of these things that, we're not always going to be able to pull the curtain back and know exactly what's happening. But understand that while it appears chaotic to me, sometimes to us, it is often rational in whatever that institution is making decisions based on. We just don't always know what the factors are.
May I also say something about that? Because it's been our experience as parents and comparing notes with other parents. And we actually have friends who interview for certain schools, some of the Ivies, and they said that sometimes it just depends on what is needed by the school. And one example is that there might be a musical program and they need a mezzo soprano, or they need, you know, a first oboe or something, and somebody is applying to it for that year, and that ups things for them. They might not have the exact grades that the school was looking for, but it just so happens that they need this particular thing on their end too. So maybe that is factored in.
100%. Yep. Tuba players, if you're from South Dakota, you, you know, I mean, some of this can feel a little random, but, you know, everyone's trying to craft a class, and a large public like the UCs are going to be less granular with some of that than like a small liberal arts college. But, you know, I do some small liberal arts colleges. I'm seeing data science as a newer major that lots of places are, you know, opening up. And so if you're saying you're interested in data science, that's also gonna, you know, so it's okay to ask colleges as you're on these visits too, and as your students sort of start to narrow down their list and get closer to applying, to ask some of these questions. Are there certain things you're looking for? You know, are there priorities that the institution has? And some may give you the like, we want good community members, kind of very basic thing, but some may say, we have a new data science program, you know, that kind of thing. What else? Any other? I'll just name, we got about 13 minutes left. Other questions?
I would make us, I would like to share a thought, which is Kai knew he wasn't, early decisions binding, right? So Kai knew he wasn't going to do early decision, but he was sort of hesitant to do early action at first. And we got the very valuable advice to do it. And that gave him an answer really early on, an acceptance. And that helped take a lot of the pressure off for him. And I was really grateful for the nudges that we got to go ahead and do that. You're not committing to anything, you're not bound to anything, but it just was a little bit of that like uplift at a particularly like time part of the year that's really hard. So I would encourage parents whose students have schools that might be on the list for early action to take it. And yes, I see that. Yes, Kai did end up going to the early action school. And I will tell you just another factor, you know, initially, you know, one of the things that I believe Ms. Cook had talked to the kids about was like, what region do you want to live in? You know, what region would you maybe want to see or go to? And, you know, I remember going to the coffee in sophomore year before shutdown. And it was like, you know, see what it's like to be in a city, and can you do the metro on your own, and you know, different things. And Kai was sort of open to flying across the country and being at a school across the country, which is strange for a child who never leaves home. We toured, and at the beginning his top choices were in Pennsylvania, and we loved the schools. But as we went through all the other schools, he really lost. He's like, Mom, I don't have a 1, 2, 3 anymore. Everything kind of melded in different things, in different ways. Going to the Accepted Students Day was very, very helpful for him. And then frankly, he said, when we picked him up from the Israel trip, he said, I didn't tell you guys, but after like day or 2 or 3 on the trip, I was very clear. I didn't want to be across the country. I didn't want to be in a different time zone, and I didn't want to take long plane flights. So luckily, he had already we were totally in love with the Willamette, and it was on the top with the other school in Pennsylvania, but he really got great clarity through that. So that was really helpful.
And also, the kids changed their mind. Miss Cook, do you remember the school that Zoe was convinced that they wanted to go to when they first met with you? Junior year. Their dream was always go to Berkeley, always go to Berkeley. They got into Berkeley. They didn't go to Berkeley. Like they're they're so convinced of what they want. So let them believe it and go through the process and see what's going to play itself out. So that was something, a piece of advice I'd say too. They might believe this is what they want, and they might even get it, but it might not even be what they ultimately want. So I
will also note that it is also very common that they don't know what they want, even up until the last minute. And I had a student that I met with multiple times last week who came in Wednesday, which would be, I was like April 27th, saying, I've got it down to 6, you know, it's like, okay. So, you know, and we had multiple sessions of processing, went and visited all of the schools during Pesach and said it made it more gray. So, you know, I just let the student talk and took notes and reflected back, and we, you know, winnowed and winnowed and winnowed, and then he added some more back on the list, and then I went and talked to the school counselor, and, you know, this is also what I do, and there's no science to it. Sometimes we flip coins, just see what comes up, but it's also not abnormal to not have a decision, but student made a decision, felt a weight lifted off of them when they made the decision, and it's all buttoned up, but know that that can happen too, and it's okay. We'll work with it. So
I'd like to also echo what Lissa was saying about just the early action. And I do encourage, if your student knows that there really is a place and it's sort of like, yeah, this is feeling good, this is where I think I could wind up, that you really should apply for early action. It's not binding, there's no pressure, but it just sort of kind of, I think it's going to improve I am told that it improves your chances of getting in, what with all the other criteria, right? Scores and transcripts and all that good stuff in your essay. But still, it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Lida, I'm not sure how to say your name, if I'm being honest.
It's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I just have a comment. We visited schools over the Pesach break, and Roman didn't get a tour of Brandeis till the last minute, but we had a friend that met us who graduated and took us around, and that was so helpful because Roman's kind of slightly interested in business, and they didn't take us over to the business school. And she took us over there, and it was Sunday, and it was open, and he saw it. And I think if he didn't see it, it wouldn't, probably the school, he really liked doing it. So I guess my suggestion is, if you know someone at a school and they could take you around and see it in a different way. My neighbor suggested that to me, and so.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And if it's during the school year as well, it's harder during the summer, but we have a small softball team of JCHS students at Brandeis. So, you know, you can always check in with me just to see, do we have any of our own alums at that school? And I can connect you, because they love generally to, you know, and work very hard to convince your student that they want to go there. But if they don't, you can also ask the admission rep responsible for JCHS, you know, is there a Bay Area student? Is there a Jewish student? You know, whatever might be a priority that you could connect your student with. That can be very useful.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so helpful. We loved Brandeis, and my husband went there, but we went during Pesach and there was no one on campus, like not a soul. And Ben knew that going in, and we talked about it. We were like, yeah, I get that, but you get it. But then you go to another school and there's just kids that look like you, and they're fun and exciting. So I would love to put the hard press on Brandeis. And I just know that there is obviously a deep connection there. So anything we could do this year to make it pop a little more.
Yeah, sure. Drop me an email so I remember, and I can send you a couple of kids' names. Carolyn, what were you going to say?
Just very quickly that, you know, in addition to like touring, if you have the opportunity and you are touring, you're visiting the school and things like that, highly encourage everyone to, if you can get in, to take a class, sit in on a class. So, you know, any intro class, big auditorium, couple hundred people, they're going to be taking these general classes anyway. That was really immensely helpful for both of my students. They both did that, and it just gave them a sense of, this is what it feels like to go to school here. You know, they loved it.
Fabulous. And I do want to get to the very important question in the chat about, you know, do you even apply to some very expensive schools, especially if they don't offer merit aid? And yeah, I think that is a question that's for the family to sort of decide. Generally, I would say, you know, do not be completely dissuaded by printed price tags straight out the gate if they mentioned that they also offer merit aid, merit scholarships, that kind of thing, because you may be really surprised at the end of the day by what you and your student are offered. And if you don't get offered a merit aid, by April, then you know that maybe that school needs to be crossed off the list. But there are a handful of very expensive places that only do need-based aid, and if you feel as though that's not something your family can afford, or you don't think you're going to qualify for any need-based aid, then it's always hard when the student then pushes to still apply and they maybe get in, and then it has to be the parent giving the no because of the financial piece of things. So as much as you can avoid that dynamic and just say this is out of our price range early on, it can get ahead of some heartbreak that can come from that.
I also, if you do qualify for financial aid, I made appointments with every single school that my kids applied to with the financial aid advisors, counselors at the school, and really talked about, is it going to be consistent for 4 years? How accurate is this? Some schools will even give you like a pre-package to see. And yet the other thing about early decision, while it is binding, if they don't give you the aid that you need, it's not. And so I wouldn't go that route unless you think you're going to get it, but we wouldn't have done it had we not had a relatively idea of what package would be offered.
And I'll also just note that while there are other resources for money, there are, outside scholarships, they're really kind of bits and pieces awards, $500 here, $2,000 here, whatnot.
And they don't let you know until after you've had a commit. So you can't rely on that.
Yep. And, the school, especially if you're on some need-based aid, may factor those awards into, now it's new information, it's new income, and it won't necessarily replace some of that need-based aid you're being offered, but it will impact your award.
Some schools will stack awards and you can find out who they are. Like there's different ones will do it differently. So that was interesting to find out.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you for that, Andy. I'm going to answer this last question in the chat, and then I think we're going to need to wrap up about doing college tours this summer. Yeah, lots of smaller schools are going to say you could do a tour, info session, maybe do an interview. Do you want to schedule an interview? I do think it's a little early for most students to think about interviewing this summer, especially if your student, if this is their first pass at the school, they haven't learned a lot about it. And if they are perhaps not quite as locked into the process, maybe not a great public speaker. Earlier in the week, I sent an email out with a couple of heads up on dates. And one of them was Monday, August 15th. I know some folks may still be doing summer camp out of the country, whatever. But if you are back in San Francisco, and it's also a week, I think that play rehearsals and some athletic practices are going to be starting. We do a 4 or 5 hour college kind of boot camp at school the morning of August 15th. I already have 5 admission reps booked to come to campus, and they will practice interviewing with your children. They will read over any writing that they have and give feedback. And this is not about they need to impress these people or even be interested in the schools they represent. These are folks that have been doing this work for 15, 20 years, are giving good general advice to your kids in a very low stakes kind of way, and just helping them kind of lock back into like, all right, I'm coming back to school. I'm about to go meet with more admission reps, and just feel ready for that. I'm also happy to do practice interviews with students as well. So if someone does want to try booking one this summer, I feel like they really know the school and it's the only time you're going to be there and all of that, I can do a mock interview with them. But generally now, so many schools are offering interviews on Zoom or phone, or, you don't have to be on the campus to do that. So don't feel pressure to sign up. And I'm just going to name it as 9 o'clock. So I appreciate all of you for being here, most especially our special guest stars from the senior class. And I will look forward to seeing all of you at graduation, if not before. And yeah, everyone have a good weekend. Shabbat Shalom.